Kay's amongst our first guests, and this is exciting.
It's an honor.
So we're gonna talk about like pop culture and pop music and the problems with modern pop culture, what it's doing good, what it's doing bad. And I think what I want to start with is just having Kay introduce herself. I sometimes hate when people ask me to do that because I'm like, I don't know what to say. But I'm going to do it to you. So go ahead and give like a short bio of who you are.
I'm a singer and writer living in LA, originally from Canada, a little city called Saskatoon, where Joni Mitchell was originally from. And I've been working professionally in entertainment as a singer and writer most of my adult life, kind of intermittently with some other things as well. And maybe that's a good start.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. And I want to say how we met. I think that we found each other on Twitter. I think you reached out to me first. And we both have a lot of opinions on Twitter, which we might get to later. But first, I want to ask you about your musical background. I know that you went to school for philosophy and theology. But can you tell us about, like, have you always sang? How did you start taking it seriously? Did you always take it seriously? That kind of thing.
Yeah, so my mom says I sang before I talked, which everyone thinks is cute. But actually, it's quite common among singers who are professionals. So just aside, you know what? Isn't it cool how God makes us? I just feel like he like puts things in us from the beginning. However you want to look at that, I just think it's really unique. So yeah, I've been singing forever, always just completely fascinated by sound. And that transferred over as well to words. I've always just been kind of obsessed with words as well. So before I can remember, it's just something I always wanted to do. I would, sing with the hairbrush and everything, like all of that. Just kind of the cliche from Born to Be. Like, I don't even remember that program on MTV back in the day where they'd like tell everybody's backstory. And everybody has a picture of them like with the hairbrush, It's cute. But yeah, so doing it my whole life. And then I was in a great children's choir. We, from my little city, but we traveled all over the world and competed and won. And it was just really beautiful choral music. And so kind of underpinning anything I've done since is just this intuitive sense of phrasing and beauty and diction and storytelling. Like that's just always sort of been a part of my being, and did a lot of things in high school, vocal lessons and things at the school. And then also when I was 16, I was on Canadian Idol, the top 100 round.
That's awesome. I don't think I even knew that there was a Canadian Idol. Americans are very obsessed with themselves. Yeah, but
I mean, everything is just like a copy. So yeah, it did well in the US, and then we had to do it. But no, I knew it was really good for a lot of reasons. It was obviously a confidence boost with something that I really cared about from the beginning, but also just seeing the inside of the entertainment world so early on was so good because I've just never been too impressed by it. Because when you've seen the host with like thick makeup on, some dude wearing like packed on foundation, and you've seen the lights and you've seen the personalities and you've seen how just absolutely human everybody is, it sets you up well, I think, for my kind of work. So that was great. And then I transitioned into doing a lot of my own songwriting, created an independent album when I was 21, and then connected with a record label and worked with them for a few years. And that was a whole adventure as well. So it's been a lot of stories.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Wow, I kind of want to hear about how it was working with a record label. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I connected with a record label that was small itself, but had worked with Natalie Imbruglia back in the late 90s. I don't remember her. Most people know her just by the song, Nothing's Fun Until, that one. You still hear it in the drugstore.
Oh.
So I worked with them for a few years, and yeah, I mean, they've also worked with this Filipino band that was on Disney's Next Big Thing, and Jack Severetti is this other really great singer-songwriter who's kind of taken off in the last few years. And yeah, like zooming around the world, working with all these kind of incredible writers, people who can name drop up to wazoo, and having her dress me up like I was some kind of, artist. All of that was quite an experience, but it was great. I mean, I eventually moved on for a lot of reasons, but it set me up to have a lot of remarkable professional networks, and eventually got me out to LA. So it was good.
And when did you move to LA? Wasn't it pandemic?
Almost years ago. Before I was last to the party, and then everything shut down. No, it was crazy. I was here for about a year, in and out. I was kind of back and forth, but I was here quite a lot that first year. And then yeah, everything just kind of shut down. And so I had a very different experience of LA from most people. And only just now, honestly, in some ways, I'm kind of getting back into really being in LA in some ways.
Interesting. So, okay. So I think one of the ways that like you guys connected on Twitter is because we're all very interested in culture. And like,
Yeah.
I think we all probably agree that we like pop culture, right? Like we like pop stars and like performances and art, but
Yeah.
the culture in America is not edifying, and there's a lot of crap out there, and there's
Yeah.
stuff that like actually leads people astray. I think on like the soul level, there are like musicians I think right now that are huge that are like actively demonic, like Cardi B and a lot of stuff that I see. Doja Cat, yeah. Right. Oh, she's who I was actually thinking of, but both fit. So anyway, there's just like what I see a lot in modern pop culture is that things are like upside down, or like the values that are being pushed or pushing people towards degeneracy. So I kind of just wanted to get like your take on modern pop culture. Maybe this is a very broad question, but like, what do you see that's good? What do you see that's bad? What do you wish there was? What are you trying to create and contribute to it?
Yeah, it's bad out there. I think that's pretty obvious, but maybe it's not obvious. I think it's the water we swim in, and a lot of people are just really desensitized to how bad it's gotten. I don't I'm like you. I like pop culture. I had a wonderful English teacher who thought I had a writing gift and who also said that I had an affinity for the ephemeral. You know, is his nice way of saying I was a little bit, maybe a little shallow or whatever at the time, but I love him to bits still. It's fine. Um,
I would take that to
so
mean
I
that you were deep. If you had
sorry.
well, ephemeral means like it disappears, right? Oh.
Yeah, it's like the frilly stuff. You know,
Oh, interesting. I thought he meant
culture.
like the beyond, like no, that's the ethereal. Oh, I'm thinking of ethereal. Sorry. Okay, continue.
Yeah, so I've always liked culture, and I love, especially I love comedy and used to love watching movies, but it's just gotten so bad that it's just almost not worth taking the risk. So I almost don't listen to anything or watch anything unless it comes recommended. And from people I think have good taste and a decent concept of what's worthwhile. And yeah, but I don't like to just complain. I think there are a lot of really complex reasons why we've gotten here. And it's not just like, oh, bad Hollywood. And it's not just like, oh, stupid conservatives, or it's not just any of these kind of really broad dichotomies you see a lot of. I think we're all part of a story that's being told over the course of a period of time, and trying to figure out how to shift that. It's not easy, but it does have to be done, because I think even in our little silos, people see things that go viral and they think it's a big deal, but viral for us is like a tiny little sliver of what most people are spending their time looking at and thinking about and watching and listening to. So it really, really matters. And it's really unfortunate that it's not better. So, I mean, that's where a lot of my work comes up. I just think that I just haven't given up on it. I think people are there and we have to be too. So that's how I look at a lot of it.
Yeah. So I guess that leads me to the question of like, what do you think makes for good culture? Like, what underlying values or like character dimensions does an artist have to make good culture?
That's a really, really good question. I often it's a hard question because I think a lot of things make you good. Craft makes you good. Not just craft, but craft for sure as a fundament to the whole thing.
Mhm.
Uh, but I think maybe even more than that, I think it's important to recognize that there's such a thing as a gift, that intuition. We were talking about me singing before I talked, but lots of people, they show up in all these ways. You see like little boys who are already so good at putting things together. Like there's just this intuitive gift there. And I think we should pay attention to that. It matters a lot. And I don't know that can ever be taught if it's not in there. I think a lot of people have creativity to be called out that hasn't been seen yet. But yeah, so I think that's important to acknowledge. And then I think in terms of your specific question about values or convictions that underline good stuff, I always point people back to like, what are you filling your heart with? Because my theory on all of it is out of the heart, the mouth speaks. What you put in here is what's going to come out. And I think if you hyper control what you're creating, that's never going to go well. You're going to end up with stuff that sounds thin or cheap or like propaganda. You're going to try to be forcing something that isn't really there. But I think if you tend to your heart and you put good things in, you can more and more trust that what's coming out is going to be good. So I think artists of all kinds, and it, that's like comedy too. That's everything. It's not just, we think of the arts in this very kind of narrow way, but anybody doing creative work has to be, I think, especially vigilant about what they're taking in, because it's forming what's going to come out.
Yeah,
So,
it's like you are what you eat.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So for making good stuff, I think we need good people. And I don't mean that in the way that most artists, if you read all the autobiographies or whatever from poetry books and stuff, like artists are always a pretty messy bunch by nature. Like we have to kind of fight to be steadier and more virtuous, maybe more than a lot of people. I don't know. It seems to be a phenomenon that
Yeah, I have a theory about that. I mean, I think that maybe nefarious, like spiritual forces are out for artists more because artists have gifts and they're people that can influence other people. So they have particularly heavy attacks from, I don't know, demons or things like that. I think also that artists I would guess they tend to be high openness. So like they're open to more. And then maybe that means that they have a higher duty to like moderate or be discerning. And that can actually be very difficult because artists like to kind of explore the edges of things and the unknown territory and the places where the average person isn't as comfortable. But that can also leave you bumping up against like bad things, which has happened in our lives for sure.
Yeah.
Right. Like we're creative types and we're like, oh, what's this over there? And then you end up being like, no, not that. Right. And we have to learn. Yeah. And a lot of it's experiential. So
and I think there are very few artists who are good artists if they don't have a high level of sensitivity to reality. I think that's what it's an intrinsic need to be able to say or create something interesting. Means you have to be able to take in a lot more information about what's going on in the world and people, and that's not actually that common. I don't think. I think it took me a long time to realize, whoa, like most people are just not taking in. I think maybe that sounds insulting. I don't mean it to be insulting. It's mostly a burden. It's a weird thing. It's just the way God made us. We're different. And so I think with that sensitivity, I think Aristotle says to see is to suffer. There's something very real about you. Just when you see more, it's harder to not be deeply affected by lots of things, which wears on you. I think it just has that effect. And so a lot of artists probably tie their own kind of unique artistic awakening to sometimes like a traumatic event where they had to really start figuring out ways to process what was going on interiorly. And I have a theory that artists, in the way that like a doctor does their residency so they become highly skilled so they can do heart surgery on behalf of the world, artists have to do the act of catharsis on behalf of the world. Like it's something we take in all of these kind of difficult things that are hard to process and integrate and translate them into something that people can hold on to and help process reality with. I think that's maybe one of the ways we could talk about what the artistic craft is.
Yeah, and spinning it into something beautiful so it like transmutes the suffering or transforms it. I mean, that's really powerful stuff, and that's what really grabs people. Yeah, that was really insightful. Yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, for lack of a better word, like an alchemy, like a turning of experience into something tangible that then people can relate to or ingest or what have you. So that's really interesting. And then it's also relational, right? And then people feel a connection with the artist. I like this idea that artistry is about relationships kind of at core. It's about like relating with people. Artists have to be very, in tune with the human experience because to make art is human. So, and just the vulnerability. I feel like I feel like this is true of any relationship, not even when you're just making art, but like the more vulnerable you are, the more connected you are. There's something about being able to connect in your vulnerability or like in your pain with somebody or to reveal it that allows them to actually be like, okay, like I feel connected to you. And that's the really like human stuff. I think about this a lot with social media because there are people that only ever show the good stuff online. They only ever talk about the good stuff. I'm like that to some degree. Like I'm not like out there like saying everything I'm struggling with 100% online. But if I do like let it slip a little and let some of that vulnerability out, I get like way more feedback from people. Like, I don't know. There's something about being like honest about like the raw suffering or difficulty of life that people connect with more, because that's a part of the human experience. And if you're only showing like a sliver of the human experience, it's just, I think people have a lot of dimensions to their life, right? And the more that you're like, hey, these other dimensions that aren't as good exist too, they feel validated. Like, oh, it's not just me that suffers. So it's more true.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead.
I think, that what you said about relationship is really key, that we're made for intimacy and communion and relationship. And so we're always seeking that. And so we're hardwired to pick it up. And obviously there are questions about like, what is the limit of that in terms of a broad sharing, right? Like, is that something that should be more kept for your private relationships, your intimate relationships? And I don't have an answer to that. I don't really think so. I think the artist has a unique calling, but yes, then something that's real. People are definitely looking for something that's real. And of course, you can be vulnerable in the sense of sharing your heart, like doing the confessional sort of style of music or poetry or whatever. You can do that, but you can also just I think the fact that you're sharing a creative part of something that's inside of you that translates to something even that has nothing to do directly with you. I think that there's a vulnerability there because it's still an interior part of yourself every time you put something like that out. And I mean, all of human life is that, right? You could zoom out and say everything is an expression of your interior, which is terrifying, right? Everything you do is this expression of what's inside.
Yes.
And so artists just get to a max point in kind of a terrifying way.
I think about that a lot I'm very into like interior decor. I find it fascinating, like go into somebody's house and just see how they've decorated, because it's a reflection of their insides. And I've been in homes where I'm just like, oh, I don't like this person. Like they have like harsh things in their home, or the art is scary, or like whatever it is. And there's not a warmth there or whatever. I don't know, but I see that so much in how people decorate their houses, how they keep their homes. And it's all just reflecting the inner world. It's not even something you consciously think about. It's just what happens. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so in that sense, I think everybody has creativity too.
Yes.
I think there's a particular creative gift that's meant to be shared more broadly, just in the same way that no one wants me flying their plane or building their bridge. Okay. Like I'm not like offended by people understanding that about me, So like in the same way, there's some people like maybe their art is not for like the general public or whatever, their creative expression. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to hyper emphasize that necessarily, but I do think that there are real gifts. But I think everybody though has to find creative ways of expressing who they are. And there are so many ways that we do that as humans. So I think any discussion of art is just like a macro discussion about what it is to be human almost.
Yes. Yeah. Well said. Great quote. So there's a lot of discussion in like our circles on Twitter. We've engaged in this before about the question of like, are conservatives good at making art? Like, is the left winning the culture war because they're just like better at art and expression and creativity and influencing culture? What are your thoughts on that? Are conservatives good at making art, or is that too much of a dichotomous question?
No, it's an absolutely fair starting point. I think there's a lot to say. If we can spend some time on it, I think we can try to chat it through. But yeah, I think people disagree with this, but I'm actually really on side with Jordan Peterson when he talks about temperaments, I think, and how that is actually in some ways more fundamental to most people's political convictions. There are definitely exceptions. I'm an exception. I think I'm much more naturally temperamentally liberal, whatever that means. But, and you were referencing the high and openness thing. I think that there are like real ways that were made that are different. And so I think I can say in some ways that, like in a general way, you could say that maybe conservatives, as that stands right now, are not going to be as naturally inclined to create great work for a lot of really interesting reasons. Not all of them bad. Like, again, saying no one wants to be building their bridge, right? Like, a lot of conservatives are practical, hardworking, pragmatic, straightforward people who know how to do well in a lot of really important ways that, frankly, artists really need, right? And so I don't see it as just a negative, first of all. So there's that. But I do think that as a result of that, and because of the lack of communication between more of that sort of personality type that is more pragmatic and maybe more directly political and maybe not as well versed neither kind of intuitively or maybe even experientially in what art is and why it's valuable. Like, I think that there's a lack of conversation between what should be kind of a give and take. And I think that's something Jordan Peterson talks about a lot with that conversation when he has it, is that ideally in a world that isn't completely bonkers like ours is, you've got these two kind of camps, if you will, helping each other be more full human beings. So I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle, just recognizing that temperamentally, maybe more of the people on the whole who tend to go with the things that we care about more fundamentally, maybe in general are not going to be as drawn. But there are definitely lots of exceptions too. And so part of it is just simply a question of money, right? Like who has the resources? But then you have to ask questions like, how did it get that way? And it involves us too. It's like, what have we valued? Where have we put our time? I think a lot of people underestimate just how much of it is just like super practical. You've got, just for example, West Hollywood is mostly gay guys with no kids, and they have a lot of money and time. That's not even like a critique at this point. It's just a fact. Whereas a lot of conservatives are very busy raising a bunch of kids and trying to pay the mortgage. I mean, you've just got a very kind of setup for that. And I'd be really curious to look into what artists were like centuries ago and how it developed to where we got to, But then, I think a lot of people will critique conservative money, like people with resources to change things, and they think like, where are they? And they're just power hungry and they don't get it, and they're so stupid, they don't understand art, they don't understand why it matters. And like, I think there are some people who maybe fit that description, but I think again, we need to be more generous in our understanding of the people, especially if we want to work with people who could change things, right? We have to understand, again, like, it's not easy to build a business and become someone that people want to come to for money. Like, that's not actually like a small thing. Like, that's a hard thing to do. I was laughing about it, thinking about it the other day. Like, even if you do it with corruption, like, that takes a fair amount of flair. Like, not everybody can do that.
Yeah.
Like, you're talking about like remarkable skills with people and psychology and numbers. And so I think that maybe what needs to happen is just a lot more conversation between people who have the resources to change and people who have the talent to change things, and get them talking. Because I think in the same way that you can critique the people who maybe have the resources to change things, you can also critique the artists for not learning some of the hard skills that actually make you finish a project, for example. Like, a lot of artists find that really hard, or they feel entitled to somebody's money. And it's like, look, I thought we weren't socialists. I thought that was like part of what we, like, you're not actually entitled to someone's resources. If it's easy to go do, just go do that and then go do your art. And the answer, of course, is it's not easy. So I think there are a ton of different components to exactly why things are the way they are. And most of us do see that there does seem to be, there is, I mean, in my own experience, there's absolutely poverty of culture, and there's a poverty of people to work with who care about the right things and are super talented. Like, that's actually a very narrow little sliver on the Venn diagram crossover. But I think it's growing. I think people are having the conversations, and I don't think it's something that has to stay this way.
Yeah, I like how you said that, the people that care about the right things. Because it seems like what I've seen from people who are creative is they're very concerned with like transgressing boundaries, or like pushing boundaries, or shocking you, or doing something transgressive or subversive. And I want to see people. And so nowadays, when you do see art or music, whether it's like a music video or a song or whatever, that's not doing that, it like really stands out. I even remember like however many years ago when like Lorde came out, and her album was like very refreshing, because I was coming out of college, and it was like, it was like I had just been bombarded with like club music for years, and it was all just about like drinking and debauchery and like whatever. And then Lorde comes out and she's like, we don't have a lot of money and we'll never be royals and we have fun. And it was like, oh my God, like, and it was like such a moment. But that's continued. Like, still the stuff that's being pumped out feels like it's very it's not edifying, and it's all about transgressing boundaries. And I mean, it's degenerate, honestly. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I was looking at like Allie and AJ. I was like, what are they up to? They're still making stuff. Interesting. Because they were big when we were like teenagers. Right. And they've like taken and they were never like into like being overly sexualized or like putting out anything that was like making you go, ooh, like, you know, like Britney Spears that like very quickly took the like sexual turn, right? Or Christina Aguilera and alienated me as a young woman. And so Allie and AJ, I was like looking up what they were up to, and I was like, oh, they like still are like pretty wholesome, and they're like putting out new music that's like kind of folky and just like it's just kind of nice. But then the thing is they're not getting as much attention. Yeah. You just get more attention if you take that sort of provocateur type of style. Yeah. It just gets more eyeballs. Yeah. Well, I remember Lady Gaga saying because she kind of came out doing a sort of, I don't know, like a girl at the piano, kind of like Vanessa Carlton, Fiona Apple type thing. And nobody wanted it. And so she started a journalist asked, like, why did you start taking your clothes off? And she goes, well, because nobody would listen to me and I needed to get their attention. And it's just a pity. And that isn't even necessarily the artist's fault. Like, I think there's also an audience duty there. Like, we need to like not support like things like that as audience members. And, you know, it's like the sin in all of us. It's like the sinful side connects with the debauchery and we go, oh, look at that. Oh my God. And then you like give it attention and then it blows up. And it's like, I work for a company that looks at media bias, and it's the same thing with news media. It's like the more you can like trigger something sensational or like off the cuff or like whatever it is, the more viral it's going to go. So yeah, it's just, and there's a sacrifice being made there. A lot of sacrifices being made there. You're sacrificing like purity and truth and edification, and it's just a penny. Yeah. But
yeah, I mean, I love that you guys both of you bringing up the role of the audience. I think one thing I just want to say, like the drum I want to beat and beat and beat is, look, you have a role to play. People really don't believe it. But the fact is that it's two-tiered, right? It's that people pay attention to the bad thing and that they don't punish artists for doing the thing that they shouldn't do. And maybe not punish is the right word, but that it's not just a positive enthusiasm, it's a lack of consequence. So I think we'll get into maybe talking about some other specific people in a bit, but it's like when an artist is trying to do something in that pure way, they're trying to avoid all of these pitfalls and sacrifice. People have no idea. Like there's just quiet canceling all the way up. Like you get these dramatic stories of people being canceled, but I could give you an army of artists who have just said, no, I won't do that. And sometimes it's dramatic. Sometimes it's dramatic, and it's just like, I just don't want to emphasize my sexuality to get my music out. I just don't want to do that. And over time, like we wouldn't know who Lady Gaga is. And it's like, yeah, you can blame her, but we have a whole world that's responsible for that because people love it. And even if they don't love it, they don't, I'm just such a huge advocate for personal agency in every single thing. People don't understand, like what you listen to and what you click on and what you share and who you support, spend your money, every single thing matters. Like we have millions of people. I can say it as an artist. I mean, I've been really focused on building infrastructure and more of the behind the scenes business stuff for a few years not because it's really what I want to be doing, but because it's very difficult to get people to care enough just about my own work, given the current cultural confines. If I wanted to just compromise and succeed in that world, I probably could have quite well. And I had a lot of support, but again, just kept stumbling into these moments where I had to say, no, I'm not doing that. Or no, I'm not going to call that person because I know it's going nowhere good. Like there's just, these things are not going to work. And so until we recognize that art really matters and that every single choice we make matters for what gets attention and eyes, like literally every day you log into Twitter, like you go on and like you actually have to make a decision. You can't just be a consumer. You have to make a decision. Like, what do I want to put out in the world today? Like, what needs eyes on it? Am I going to reshare that controversial, idiotic take by someone who's just trying to get engagement bait? Like, is that what I'm going to do today? Or am I going to try to find somebody who's doing something good and support them? Because we have that kind of power. And until people get that, nothing's going to change.
It reminds me of like the Instagram algorithm. Like I've explained this to people before, that because they'll be like, oh, like my discover page on Instagram is just all like horny girls and this and that. And I'll be like, you need to never click on it. Don't ever click on. They know when you're looking at it. They track how long you've looked at it, and they'll feed you more. It's like it's like the discover page reflects you, right? It's your behavior. It's a mirror in a way. And so I think that's exactly what you're saying. It's like our popular culture reflects us as on a population level, and we're all individually contributing to that. And it's like, if we're not self-controlled people who are watching out for our sin, watching what we consume, watching what we eat, so to speak, and saying no to things that are bad, there's going to be more of it. Like if everybody didn't like want to eat junk food, the stores wouldn't be full of Doritos. Like if it didn't sell, right? So it's like that the onus is on us to like you said, like give that feedback, and we have to be self-controlled to provide that feedback. Yeah, I don't think people realize how much they actually participate. They sort of lull themselves into like, oh, well, it's just social media. I'm just like, it's like, no, it really, you have way more power than you think you do. I think that it's actually a personal empowerment issue, is that people don't know how far what they do how far it goes, even if they're just like in an on, or like everything is like this ripple effect, like starts here and it just ripples outward. And yeah, and that's kind of exciting. Like that's a good thing. The democratization of media is a good thing. Well, I've been thinking about how we're all cultural influencers, and I mean, or like we all can be, right? Just by virtue of existing, being connected to one another, sending a tweet, like making something. You are the culture. It's small things too. It's like how you choose to like treat somebody today is your culture. Yeah. Like you were saying, what you choose to retweet is your culture. Like, what you choose to look at, how you choose to. It's this life is this whole like discernment process of like, what are you supporting? So, and then you have to kind of find the other people who are on your wavelength and doing the things that you want to see, instead of constantly being in this reactive state of just talking about what you don't like. I'm totally guilty of this. Just getting stuck in the critical mindset or the critiquing mindset is kind of antithetical to creating things. I think conservatives get stuck there a lot because we tend to be like critically minded or like disagreeable maybe. And so we can get stuck in the critique mindset. So it's been something we've been focusing on the last couple of years. Like, what are we creating? You see a lot of like the West has fallen. It's like, okay, hold on. If the West has fallen, that means there's all this fertile ground that you can build on. Like, I live in an area in the Rust Belt in the United States, and I look around and all I see is opportunity. Like, it's also very, there's a sad angle to it where like a lot of the buildings are falling down and things need a paint job. But then I'm like, wow, someone could really do something neat with that, like, so you can build in the ruins, and you don't always have to be lamenting it. It's actually like a very fertile time period. So
my mom told a story about, I can't remember who it was, but it was a daughter of somebody who'd been kind of a famous folk singer for a little while in the 70s. And the mom, the famous folk singer, had spent time in New York. I think, no one criticized me on the dates. I'm not super clear on it. But whenever New York was kind of down and out, a lot of artists came in. There's a point when that was happening, and the artists and the entrepreneurs came in and made New York what it is. Okay. And, in that scene, she was able to cultivate this kind of incredible artistic network and eventually succeed. And so when her daughter was, it must have been late, like right before 2010 territory-ish, in there somewhere. After the 2008 crash, and Detroit was a mess. And so her daughter was saying, I want to go to New York like you did, Mom. Like, I'm going to go like rough it out in New York and like be an artist. She's like, oh my gosh, if you're a real artist, you wouldn't go to New York. You would go to Detroit.
Oh,
that's where you would go. So it was funny. Sorry, go ahead.
There's a brilliant clip of Jordan Peterson talking about that, where he says like artists take over the places that have been like abandoned, and then they like push through the edges of it and revitalize it, and then that draws people back in, and then the artists leave. I mean, it's like this cycle, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was funny because I kind of looked in for a little while into setting something up in Detroit, and it didn't work out, and that's fine. But I connected with this priest who was building vineyards. He was buying old houses, fixing them up, giving them to families to rebuild his neighborhood, and then using some of the properties to build a vineyard. And his goal, he just passed away this year actually, but at the time when we were talking, he mentioned he wanted the vineyards for tourism and for work and to beautify the neighborhood. And so it's exactly the perfect analogy for what you guys are saying.
Wow. Yes, I love that.
Right.
I mean, I think San Francisco. Oh, what was that?
We need vineyards in the midst of destruction. That's what we need to plant the vineyard.
That's the perfect metaphor. Yeah. And I think it was a similar thing in San Francisco too, with it was not what it was and the artist. And when you go there now, you can see the artist's contributions, but the people who did that aren't there, and they haven't been there for a while. It's just been techies. And the artists have gotten pushed out. I mean, Amy lived in an artist warehouse in San Francisco for a little bit and just like quickly got like pushed out. I would say that place is actually hostile to artists now. Yes. It just wants tech money, and otherwise the earth is quaking under you at all times if you're not bringing in tech money. So it's very difficult. A lot of artists when I was there moved to like Reno. Yeah, I know, is apparently becoming full of artists. And I think Austin is another example of this, where it was like kind of funky and cheap rent and sort of this like musical center. And now it's kind of going the same way. I did read recently that the rent lowered a little bit because they build so much, but then it's like you're building all these condos and like what you're using things. Yeah. Like they're not building like traditional architecture there or anything. So yeah, and I mean, what do artists need to create? Like you need to have low overhead, unless you're super rich, which like I was just reading that Lana Del Rey comes from a lot of money, and I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense. Because I was always like,
I mean, people do. Yeah. And by a lot of, like, most people aren't like multi-billionaires or something, but like, you know, there are videos of Taylor Swift at 14 driving around in her Hummer, right? Like,
interesting. Okay.
So many people do come because it gets you at just a few years ahead, right?
Yeah. Like we went to college. We had to like do the practical things to like, you know, make money that we had a roof over our heads. And if you don't have to do that because you have family money, then you're like 10 steps ahead. That's actually a good. Oh, go ahead.
Well, zoomed out even a little bit more. It's like I have friends in Nigeria. So, okay, I'm from like whatever, like let's say middle class. Upper middle class, like kind of territory. So I've had a lot more security than a lot of people. I do not come from money, like in the way that we're talking about. But for perspective, a Nigerian doesn't even get a mic, you know?
Oh.
Like, so we, you know, just so in some ways, like it's really valuable to have the conversation about like the major stars and where they came from and how they got there, and compare that. But I think also for perspective, like a lot of people don't realize just how much we have and how little we have to worry about, like that we fundamentally have a lot of leisure time. We don't have to go like cart water from the river.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
To live and die, never getting a chance to even dream or think about creating something because there's no time except to survive. So just a little bit of that zoom out as well. I mean, I think we have a lot to be remarkably grateful for as well.
Yeah, even an American that doesn't, or North American, you're Canada, but that doesn't grow up with a ton, still has a lot. I mean, just the fact that, you know, we can cobble together a little podcast studio, right? I mean, it's just, and then start making things like it. We're very fortunate, even at the mid to lower end of wealth in America, you're still pretty darn wealthy, right? Yeah. So that you mentioned Taylor Swift, and we wanted to actually get your thoughts on Taylor Swift. We don't really know her work very well. I've never felt drawn to her or interested in her. The little bits from her that I've seen, I think I just like people who are kind of weird, and she's like not weird, and it feels not interesting to me. I don't know. That's the best way I can think to explain it. But I know you have an interesting take on her, and she's such a big phenomenon right now. Like, what do you think of her? What is your take?
Well, I've been kind of watching her work for like a long time because I remember the first person who ever told me about her. This was like quite literally almost 20 years ago. And I remember watching and thinking, I don't get it. I just didn't see much talent. I thought she'd be flash in the pan. I was dead wrong. Okay, so there's something to think about there, and maybe my instincts aren't good. So we start there. That's fine. I've never thought she was particularly talented. I found her to be really mediocre. I was, when I encountered her, I had been listening, I was raised on as a singer-songwriter, and singer-songwriter meant something very specific when I was listening to it, which was poetic, like really intelligent poetic folk, storytelling, Really beautiful stuff. Like we were talking about vulnerability, that confessional style, but like not in like a grotesque diary way, but like really artful. So that to me was what a great writer was and what a musician was. And I saw talent, either these gorgeous voices or very unique voices, certainly remarkable stage presence. They were multi-instrumentalists, like there was so much there that was so admirable. And this mystique. And for me, Taylor Swift was like listening to high school poetry, right? Which I guess that's the appeal. Fundamentally, that's kind of the mystery, right? So there's a lot. I mean, what part do we want to focus on? Because I think I don't think she's a great talent. I think I've seen so much talent. Of course, like she's better than the average person singing in their shower or something. Like it's not like she has no talent. But when you've seen the talent I've seen and you know what's there, I don't think that's why she's famous. I think she's famous because she had very supportive parents, a really good team, great marketing, and she learned a lot of that. And most stars don't have that kind of support through the length of their career, and she has. And she's smart, and she's a good businesswoman, and she's even said things like writing a song is kind of like writing marketing slogans. So she even sees her own work that way.
Oh, interesting.
Kind of cheap. Like she's always like data testing, and that's why you see so much of the Zoomer language like leaking into her recent work, because I mean she's not a Zoomer, but she's picking up all these like saying the right phrases because I'm sure they did data collection on like what is interesting to people right now,
Oh,
so
wow.
It's science more than an art. And
wow.
So that's from like the talent level. I mean, I don't think it's very useful for me to get on and just like insult a bunch of people who love her. Like I've been trying to sit in the mystery of it, especially since it just like exploded on Twitter the last couple months. I was planning to write an essay about her like a year ago, and then Mark Hemingway kind of did it, and then I sort of switched gears, and then other people talked about it. So I've just sort of let it go. But I think the draw is that she's relatable. I think a lot of what I'm seeing and trying to hear is that a lot of women just feel like there's nowhere they're allowed to just be girls. Like it's kind of the opposite problem that men have been complaining about not having like men only spaces. Like you're not allowed to just like be girly and like frills and talk about boys or whatever, like you're not allowed to, just be kind of that silly part of yourself and not be kind of dismissed as stupid and silly because of the things you care about. So I think there's something to be said for that. And I don't want to fault people for being drawn to something that resonates with them,
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a piece of it. And then this like new anon Edmund Smirk dude, I think it's Michael Knowles. I think it's him being an anon. That's my, like he wants to seed his ideas from an anonymous. Anyway, I could be completely wrong. That's my theory. So anyway, he has this phrase, Swiftian normality.
Yes.
And I was a little bitter when I saw it because I'm like, no, she should not be emblematic of normality for a lot of really good reasons.
Oh.
But I want to take it seriously because he's right in principle. I think he's wrong in practice, but I think he's right in principle. I think the fact that so many people glom onto her is something we should pay attention to and not mock. Like, I think there's just a lack of wisdom there. We should try to understand what the draw is. And I think it's important to acknowledge that for a lot of people, she is like the best option, and they're trying to pick the best thing. They're looking at the absolute degeneracy that characterizes our time, and they're thinking she's not that, So I want to acknowledge that that's a good impulse, and that the fact that she does represent in some ways anyway, like just somebody normal who likes boys and can be successful and is entertaining, and maybe someone you want to have a coffee with sometime and might enjoy, like that is not a bad thing. Like none of that's bad. And, to fulfill that, she doesn't have to be like the greatest lyrical genius of all time,
Yes.
Like it's okay.
Yeah.
But I think where it breaks down for me is that she's actually really corrupt. And I think it's just that our perception, because it is so bad out there, is really broken. Like if our standard is it's not Cardi B, like what kind of standard is that? Like we're talking like 1 degree away from straight porn.
Yeah.
Like that can't be our starting point. Like our starting point has like what's objectively good, because like, if you actually look at her from that angle and you see what she wears and how she dresses and like the fact that there's an expletive in at least every other song. I mean, I remember 20 years ago, like it was only people with checked out parents who could have an album like that at 13, right? And now like little girls are being told this is like absolutely culturally acceptable as a 13-year-old girl to be like listening to this stuff. And I'm sure a lot of people think I'm a pro culture for being mentioning it, but I'm just trying to articulate like, wow, how far we've come in such a short span of time. And then, you know, she's got a trans as her romantic opposite in the Lavender Haze video. No one talks about that. Maybe they don't know. You know, I think a lot of people don't actually know how bad a lot of her stuff is. And then just like these anthems for like the alphabet stuff. And, you know, like we cancel Budweiser for Dylan Mulvaney, but then like celebrate her as like emblematic American normality. Like I can't put those pieces together.
Interesting. See, I didn't know that about her. You did show me one video of her that was, very helpful.
Yeah, I talked to you about this, Kay. I retweeted something, and my take was just like, I like the color of this, and I miss Technicolor.
Right.
And the left seems to do that well, and all we ever have is like red, white, and blue, and there's nothing wrong with that, but also maybe we could change our aesthetic a little bit to be appealing. And but the content of that video was really shocking to me. I actually thought she was more wholesome than that.
Wow.
And she's not. It was gay propaganda.
Yeah.
It really was.
And worse, like really horrific and mocking and cruel. Like there's a real bent there that's like deeply, deeply disturbing to anybody who even has a little bit of like a shred of common sense or common decency. It's really shocking. And that was years ago. I mean, I think she's gotten substantively worse since then.
Wow.
So yeah, I think there's just, I want to assume the best of people. I think a lot of it is just she is the best on offer. And that's a problem I'm willing to take on. You know, like I agree. Like we don't have good alternatives, and we have to solve that problem because people want pop music. I mean, I was having this conversation with people kind of who are like leaders in our circles and saying like, we need pop music. And a lot of people are like, oh no, like it's going to be a folk revival. I'm like, it can be that too. And we can do pop too. But people I mean, if nothing was proved by the whole explosion of the Twitter conversation around her this year, like it's clearly that people still want pop music.
Yeah. Oh, and young girls want pop music. I love pop music, and like, and you're looking to pop stars because they're a little older than you, and like, how are they acting, and what are they wearing, and like all of that, and it's that's fine, you know, and also pop is like fun and bright and like
we need that more than ever.
Like folk's fine, but it's somber and you know it's got a different kind of buzz to it. So
one thing I did like about, so I'm a millennial, so Lady Gaga was like our Madonna, and what I liked about her was that she was weird. And this is where I don't relate to Taylor Swift. So I'm like, wait, in a performer, I want a little like pizzazz and like costuming and like things like that. Some creativity. She was always like hand making her own outfits and doing these kind of like avant-garde things. And I found that really exciting. But then she also had talent. She could sing. I think we were coming out of an era where pop singers were lip syncing a lot. And
they were manufactured
and they were very industry made.
Yeah.
She clearly came out of an organic like club scene in New York City and was singing her own songs live on stage and writing her own music as well and playing the piano. She could also play an instrument.
Yeah.
A lot of pop stars couldn't. So that was exciting. But then, you know, she still wasn't good. Like she still had that degenerate bent and, you know, like a darkness to her. She did one album that had like Christian themes, which I like that album a lot, and I thought it was interesting that she was playing on her like Catholic background, but it still wasn't like anything wholesome. She's far from wholesome.
She's kind of still subverting the Catholic.
Still subversive, yeah. So
which I guess Madonna did too.
There's a take of her like eating a rosary in the Alejandra video, and I was like, you lost me, girl. Like you know, just things like that, just this shock value stuff to get attention, but like I guess, yeah, like Taylor does that too, though. I don't know what her intentions are. I know she's doing that to get attention.
Yeah, I think she's objectively not as bad, but I would say people are like, well, why do you even bother critiquing her when you got like Cardi B or like these other people that should be critiqued? But it's like, because our people aren't listening to Cardi B. They are listening to Taylor.
Yeah.
So it really matters. I think it's more insidious because people, it's like the poison pill dipped in sugar, right? It's like, there's enough of this like glittery, sweet. She's really intelligently maintained that brand that she had when she was 15, but it's not the same thing. And even at 15, it's not as sweet as people thought it was. Like she had revenge tracks and like it was kind of gross even then. ways, but like seed form, right?
Interesting.
And so, so I think that's where the critique comes in because, that it's very insidious when you think something's better than it is, and you give your kids carte blanche to listen to it, and they're like taking in this messaging that 20 years ago would have been really shocking to just the average parent. We're not talking about like really conservative Christian people. Like, again, when I went to school, there were like 2 kids in the whole school who had like the Eminem album, and it was a big deal that he said the F word. Like, it was a really big deal. And now, and like normie, like suburban parents who were like, I don't want my kids listening to that. It's indecent,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just don't know how we got to where we got to. And I mean, if Taylor would ever listen to this, like, I think she can be better than she is, both morally and from a talent perspective. I think some of her genius showed in her folk albums, and she could translate more of that intelligent storytelling to her pop stuff. And I think it could be better. I think she has a natural gift that if she weren't so married to the market and the money, that she could actually create good things. I think that she probably has that in her. I think she's worked really hard, and she's proven that she can make up for what some people have naturally through a lot of hard work. Like, she's really outworked a lot of people. And I think she could absolutely ditch all of this gross stuff. Like, she's just kind of pandering to the regime, and that's what she looks like. I think for those who see, it's really obvious that she's just there to bend to whatever is
stay in the club,
told.
kind of. She has to like stay in the club.
Yeah. Like, some people need to be threatened. I don't think she needs to be threatened. I think she just knows the game and likes to play it.
Yeah. And
that could change.
Yeah, like I think a lot of actually conservative women like her. But I'm realizing there's actually a section of the conservative what have you movement that is more like liberal on those kinds of things. It's been a little confused. Conservatism is very like broad and fractured, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So you have like people who defend her on the right and the people who hate her on the right. So it's just, she is, like you said, she is kind of like towards our side and worth talking about because she has influence there. She clearly elicits like a pretty strong reaction in people. And something is going on in the culture that is worth talking about. You have like even quite people like making up, I would call them conspiracy theories about her, like that she's, I'm like, that's reading way too much into it. What are these ideas that she's going to like come out for Joe Biden and influence the election? It's like, well, like that's not like a lot of the pop stars in this industry are liberal. That's not like some most all
goes with the territory. Like you don't understand how these work. It's like, okay, maybe there are some like black books that memes get written into. I don't know. I've never seen them. What I can tell you is that everybody knows one person sending a text can really change your whole career. And you just know that. It's all implicit. Like, I've got friends who are very successful in film and TV shows and things. And it's what you just learn over time. It's what you don't say. People will say, oh, like, I don't have to believe what I believe. And I'm like, but you know the consequence if you do, right? Like, if you say, sorry, I said that wrong, but if you say the wrong thing, you know the consequence. So it's like, okay, so maybe someone gave her $40 million to like release her album early so she's available to just promote Joe in the fall. Like, who knows? I don't know. I can't begin. Why would I even surmise? But I think it's just as likely, much more likely, that she just understands the game. And not even just that, but has been influenced by a very insular group of people for like 20 years. Like, she hasn't probably heard or interacted with someone who thinks like us in 20 years. And so
and she's surrounded by yes men, like yes people. Oh, like
I was gonna say
I think that they're not exposed to other ideas. There's no chance for them. They're just completely in a bubble. Yeah, and I think that's the case with like most of all of Hollywood. It's like liberal. They're interacting with other liberal people with the set of ideas that they have, and like, where are they gonna pick it up? And anyone who's a conservative to them is almost this like caricature. It's like this far away type person. They're not around them. I think if you live in like other places, you'll have to be exposed to liberals and conservatives and people all over the spectrum. But particularly in California and in Los Angeles, you maybe know about this better than I do. It's really a deep blue place. So, and I think there's something with class there too. There's like an idea that conservatives are low class. And I not to put it like crassly or anything, but I did see this chart that showed the professions and the political breakdown, and on top, big bubbles. Like most liberals are academics, lawyers, people in these like white collar professions, and then down here, the conservatives were mostly like people in the trades, people work with their hands.
Yeah.
So there is a real class divide there, and
Yeah.
so it's not like it's entirely like a false perception that conservatives are. But like that's just, but then it's like I just dream about like what if we had like conservative elites, right? Because right now our elites are liberal, and then our culture is kind of a mess. Well, it's a big mess.
Yeah, and I think it's true also that just simply what education has become is indoctrination, and so it's not so much that like what exactly is the correlation, right? It's an interesting question to ask. People who look at the university system and are like, I don't want to be in that. So, which was me actually. I went a different track. I do have a lot of education, but I went to like really small Christian and then Catholic undergrad and grad school, and was very intentional about the kind of education I wanted to get and how. But if I hadn't had those options, I just wouldn't have gone. I just looked at what it was, and I was like, I don't really want a part of that. I don't want to become. I don't want to become what they want me to become, and I also don't want to just fight for 4 years if I'm not going to become that. So it's just interesting to conceive of like a lot of people just become that because of the circles they're in, right? And it's so I don't know if I can say it the right way, but we have to figure out what the exact correlations are. But I think in another sense, like humility and practical skills and family and all of those things play a role in keeping you grounded. And the people who are more likely to have a lot of those things are going to be people who stay closer to home and aren't as concerned with status. And, so there's a lot to unpack there about how it actually unfolds. But I'm with you. I think there's not something like inherently opposed to excellence or doing really well as a conservative. But you do have to be very committed. Like, I think, I don't want to just point at myself, but a lot of people are like me, where they fight through all of those challenges and just refuse to compromise. And it is available, but you have to really want to stick to your principles. If you're willing to fight that fight, you can still climb your way up,
That's encouraging. I think so I was like you. I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to make art. And I'm from a small town. I just did not see a way to hone my craft, and everyone else was going to college. So I just did. And I think that I wish we had more like artist apprenticeship and a culture of apprenticeship for artists. If you are somebody who doesn't want to go through the university system. But anyway, I want to talk about your crowdfunding project. So you launched a crowdfunding project yesterday, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And can you tell us about that? Can you tell us what the project is?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of it is just a response to everything we're talking about. I think rather than just complaining, I think we need to give real alternatives. And so for me, it's like, look, we're going to step out in this. It's electropop, anthems of hope, mid-dystopia. It's called Songs for the Apocalypse. And the goal is to use those apocalyptic themes that everybody's stewing in as a takeoff point for something hopeful and fun and enjoyable. And my big dream is that this becomes a template that women can look to, men can look to, whatever, and say, look, like there's a way to do this well and intelligently. You don't have to compromise your artistic standards. You don't have to compromise your principles. You can do something that's wholesome and clean, no expletives, no suggestive content. It does not have to be boring. Like we have a huge palette of things to talk about and sing about and different visuals to play with. There's so much we can do without at all having to go outside of the things we most care about. And we don't have to obey the ideology. We don't have to go the regular music route. We don't have to pretend we aren't who we are. And, that takes a lot of people jumping on board. I think people, again, we were talking about people having agency. It's really important that people recognize, like, this is where the rubber hits the road. Like, what you support and what you share really matters, because we don't have those channels yet. We're building them. Like, a lot of us are running really hard to build out new channels and to show that it can be done. So that's the kind of the underlying thesis, that this can be done well, that it's needed, that people will respond. They'll respond generously and excitedly and with enthusiasm, and that they'll get it even if like pop music isn't their thing. They'll understand it's not just about like my tastes. It's about putting stuff out into the culture that people need. So the vision's a lot bigger than just me. And And also using it as a takeoff point for supporting a lot of other artists. That's the dream, linking in with sort of the venture capital territory I'm stepping into. We want to help artists not have it be as hard as it's been for people like me. We want to cut a path so that a young, beautiful, talented girl doesn't have to feel like Lady Gaga and start taking her clothes off. Like, we want to find them and say, no, like, you can do something cool. We're going to help you. So that's the vision. The songs are really fun. I'm really excited. It's very different for me. I came to LA just as like a little singer-songwriter. Everybody was like, why aren't you in Nashville? And, the punchline is that because I got to start doing this stuff as well. I still do the other stuff, but more of the folk stuff. But there's just something so much fun about projects like this. And, you mentioned earlier, like the melancholy in folk music, and it's beautiful. I love it. I'll always listen to it. But yeah, it was so good for me to create this stuff and start creating and playing in that area. And I just have an instinct that lots of people are going to enjoy it from the listening and in a similar way. It's a totally different kind of energy. So that's the project. Yeah.
That's so exciting. And you have a beautiful voice, and I love what I've seen that you've created so far. We were just watching one of your music videos yesterday. We were like, yes, I get what she's doing and I love it. Love songs.
Yeah.
And you've sort of stepped into this territory before, and you showed it to me, and I was like, this is exactly what I want to see. This is like, I am the market for what you're trying to do.
Awesome.
So it's really exciting for me, like electro pop and like something colorful, but you're talented and have a good voice, and it's kind of simple, really. Like that video, it was there's something relatable about how it's kind of like handmade. It's you know what I mean. It's not overproduced. I think we're like bombarded with overproduced pop music, and like yours just has a lot of soul and heart in it. So I'm excited. And we'll link to your crowdfunding campaign in the description here. Yeah, but. And if there's anything else you want to plug, we loved having you. But where can people find you online? Where should they look you up?
I mean, it's almost always K Clarity on almost every platform you can imagine. If I'm there, that's what I'm under. Maybe I'm not active, but definitely Twitter, less on Instagram. And now Pax Paloma Songs is the handle on Twitter, Pax Paloma Official for the pop stuff. So if people want to check that out. And yeah, I would just... more than that, it's like, I just would love for people to understand that they really matter. And this is a really important moment we're in where you choose to direct your attention and what you share, what you support, all of that matters so much. And I really think we have a future here if we'll fight for it. I really believe that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well said. I think that's a good note to end on.
Yeah.
We support you. We love you.
Yeah, for joining us.
Okay.
Yeah.